You know, sometimes you find hidden diamonds in the rough that really make you rethink what your favorite genres are. And Swedish hardcore punk and post-hardcore band Refused might have just done that by creating my favorite punk album of all time. This is The Shape of Punk to Come, the third album by Refused, and an absolutely brutal takedown of its titular genre. That demonstrated Refused was not only a legend of underground punk, but also pioneers of experimental and art punk through the use of jazz samples, electronic effects, and a consistent ability to subvert the listener's expectations. To kind of take it track by track, the album opens up with Worms of the Senses, Faculties of the Skull, which starts with a poem written by vocalist Dennis Lyxzén before exploding into an epic riff and a transition into a post-hardcore-esque melody, along with a sneak peek of what's to come in the record, including David Sandstrom's incredible drum work and some of the sharpest lyrical satire you'll hear in a punk record, such as "I've got a bone to pick with capitalism and a few to break." Yup, this album is, in a way, socialist punk. And even though it goes against the grain of what punk is all about most of the time, it really works in its favor. Because this is an album that satirizes the genre of punk itself. A theme that continues on the next track, Liberation Frequency, which is more melodic and groovy than the borderline hardcore track that preceded it. However, the comparatively low and soft verses do not stop the chorus from being explosively loud. Up next after this track is a song that I severely lowballed when I first listened to it, The Deadly Rhythm. After listening to it some more, I finally see it for the masterwork that it is, because the drums, the constantly shifting math rock-esque tempos, and Dennis's voice make this track one of the most explosive and aggressive ones on the entire album. And the fucking Night in Tunisia spoken word piece that connects Liberation Frequency with Deadly Rhythm, and the jazz sample that introduces Deadly Rhythm, damn, it's so good! Summer Holidays and Punk Routine follows a nice pairing between the main guitar riff and the rhythmic guitar, alongside one of the best lines on the entire album. "I'm still certain that what motivates me is more rewarding than any piece of paper could be." Fuck yes. Brutist Palm number 5 is an instrumental cut that is pretty much the embodiment of another one of the best characteristics of this album, which is its uncanny ability to fuse genres that are very different from punk in a way that is so seamless, it feels like punk was built to be this way from the start. In the case of this album, and especially Brutist Palm number 5, the genre that punk is fused with is electronic. And the pretty xylophone in the mix of this instrumental cut gives an element of artificiality to the happiness, which only augments to the album's very fatalistic message that culminates later in the record by the end. Give me a minute on that. After this instrumental bit comes the most famous song in Refused discography and in the album itself, New Noise. And let me just say, it truly does earn the title as one of the best punk tunes I've ever heard in my life. The instantly memorable riff, Dennis screams, the complex composition that ends in one of the best conclusions to a song I've ever heard. This is what punk is all about, goddammit. Besides the instrumentation, this song also contains one of the key elements of making this album so good: its heavy use of samples. In this case, New Noise samples the monologue from the main character of the Francis Ford Coppola film Apocalypse Now, which somehow fits like a glove, and I don't know why. The Refused Party Program has a nice spoken word manifesto from Dennis, but it is the most straightforward punk song on the entire album, even if it is still enjoyable, with a buzzing synth in the end that still breaks my ears. Another sample found in this record is in the following track, Protest Song 68, where the spoken word opening is a reference to Tropic of Cancer, which is a novel by Henry Miller. I've never heard of him before, but it sounds cool. And yet again, the lyricism of the band shines through in lines like, "Fixed dogmas can't substitute. Creative thoughts in action could be dangerous. Art is a threat." The following track, literally called Refused Are Fucking Dead, is an insanely distorted and lo-fi track, whose title itself is a mockery of a Born Against song. How much more satirical can this album get? And you're telling me this song includes 3 different riffs in the span of a minute and a half? Fuck all other substandard punk noise. This is the treatment the genre deserves. And the title track somehow remains consistent. The guitar riff is once again amazing and is reminiscent of At the Drive-In level post-hardcore. The chorus is louder than the others on the songs, and some of the lyrics, again, like this line, "Give acclamation to these blue ribbon babies." Tell me that current day politicians wouldn't try to cancel this band on their social media platforms. However, the final 2 tracks are really ominous. The penultimate track, Tannhauser Derivé, is 8 minutes long, but it somehow doesn't drag on, since it has an Igor Stravinsky jazz sample, a break featuring buzzing tones and, I guess, drone passages, and a sudden interruption in the guitars to make way for some falsely happy, pillowy, and smiley harmonica riffs, but the tone of the track prior to this makes those happy tones seem very ominous and, as I said, fabricated. So surely the final track will be the massive explosion of a conclusion this album wants, right? Wrong! There couldn't be a more subversive yet fitting conclusion to this album than the Apollo program was a hoax, where the soft tone somehow makes the rest of the album seem sane given it is so scary. The lo-fi quality of the song, the acoustic guitars that brood on for its 5-minute runtime, and Dennis' spoken word lyrics resigning himself to the fucked up state of the government make this track a painful contrast and simultaneous acceptance of everything that this album complains about in society. There is no utopia to reach, and no matter what direction we take, we will always get the bad ending politically. Even though Refused are confirmed to be massive socialists given their lyrics and their public statements, they seem pretty complicit and accepting of the fact that their protests will never work and their communist utopia that Marx implanted into them will never come to fruition due to the many obstacles in their way. There is no escape from rampant corruption. Damn, I became a political scientist within these few minutes. What the fuck happened to me? But that's it. That's all I wanted to say about this album. It's genuinely, astonishingly well produced. The instrumentals are consistently heavy and punchy throughout its 50-minute runtime. 55 minutes, actually. Dennis's vocals are extremely aggressive, ugly, and rebellious in the best way possible. And this album's influence cannot be overstated. Like, the way that this album has influenced hardcore and post-hardcore bands like Turnstile, At the Drive-In, and Paramore is something that is insanely difficult to accomplish with a punk album, especially. The Shape of Punk to Come is not only a satire of politics in general, but it's also a jab at the genre of punk itself because it challenges the boundaries of what that sound can perform. And its immensely creative use of jazz samples, electronic beats, and some of the most biting lyricism in punk yet made it so Refused would, while it was unknown at the time, renew punk for the new age. This was a new era of punk, and this album is a fatalistic attempt at the revolution that ultimately succumbs to its own failure. There is no way out from the evils that capitalism can provoke. Refused used to be an unknown band when this album came out, but through the years, they grew to be one of the most appreciated and respected names within music communities. So, yep, this album is perfect. And alongside its really biting politics and satire, it is a 10 out of 10.